I already see a wave. Yay. Okay. Well, hello and welcome to our fundraiser live stream event. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just making sure that everything is working properly. Yeah, okay. So for the first couple minutes, I'll just let people join in the chat and hang out. And then I'll get to the housekeeping items. And in the meantime, while there are people joining in and I'm waiting on those, just let me know where you're joining from. And are you Aerospec? Are you joining as an Aero person, as an Aerospec person, or are you joining as an ally? That would be awesome to know. So yeah. And it looks like everything is working okay. All right. Now that we're in and hopefully people are able to join, we'll get started. So good time zone to everybody. I'm Nair, Aurea's treasurer, coming to you from Canada. In particular, I'm on traditional Algonquin land, and all of us today are likely on traditionally Indigenous land. So I want us to take a moment to acknowledge that, really. It might be Native, Aboriginal, First Nations, or a very specific name from where you are from. So I'd encourage you to look up who those keepers of that land are. Some other lands that the Aurea members are working from today include Quinnipiac, Wappinger, Paugussett, Taino, Calusa, Seminole, Chickasaw, Duwamish, Squamish, and the Darumbal lands. So I hold a lot of gratitude toward the community around me for keeping this space and allowing my presence on it. But I also wanted to take this time to recognize its history of being taken through colonization and continued oppression. There are a number of Indigenous Arrows in the community. So I'd like us to acknowledge that as well, and them. It's important for us to consider really how our daily lives, especially with technology, are affecting the natural world, and in many cases, polluting what's been taken care of for millennia. So again, I encourage you to look around you, acknowledge and take responsibility for how your history, so the past history that you have and the present history you're making, have shaped our natural and our societal homes. So for our event, we'll have a couple of hosts. There's me. I've already started up really beautifully awkwardly. I'm a genderqueer Aerospec Gray Ace. And I'll be with you for the first half. My pronouns are am Aris, singular, or they, them, theirs. So an example sentence for y'all, A says their pronouns for himself. They introduce their pronouns for themselves. I'll pass the baton over to our second facilitator in our second half. We have a few Aurea members behind the scenes in the chat and who are using their awesome, amazing internet connection to stream this to YouTube. So huge thank you to everybody who has helped and is currently helping right now putting this event together. So the purpose of this event, right? I see that there is an ally in the chat. So this event is to celebrate Aromantic Spectrum Awareness Week. So for allies that are tuning in, and for anyone that isn't aromantic, really, the point of this week is to spread awareness of aromantic experiences just across the spectrum of the identity. If you need a quick 101, aromantic is a word that describes people who experience little to no romantic attraction to others, or whose experiences of romance are kind of disconnected from normative societal expectations. So this can be like feeling repulsed by romance, or being uninterested in romantic relationships at all, or as defined culturally, or other similar experiences. The societal concept of romance is kind of experienced queerly by all of us, and differently by many of us around the world as well. Arrow means something a little different in each space. I've also said Oreo a few times, which is the name of the organization I'm representing today. OREA stands for the Aromantic Spectrum Union for Recognition, Education, and Advocacy. We're a volunteer run, and we're an organization that just connects people together, provides resources for arrows and for allies, and we try to advocate for arrows in broad conversations about inclusion. We subsist entirely on donations from the community, including us, part of the community. Today, we're bringing together arrows from across the world to hang out, which is really cool. We're going to celebrate and discuss in a language everybody on our team shares. All to say thank you to everyone who keeps us going, whether that's financially or through your stories or through honest feedback, just being here. So if you'd like to support our fundraising today, the link to donate is in the description below this video. It's aromanticism.org/donate. So again, I'll spell that out for you. aromanticism.org/donate. The proceeds will go to funding our web hosting costs and organizational expenses. So no pressure to donate if you can't at the moment. I know that the world is a little bit bonkers at the moment. But there are a lot of other ways to get involved if you want to, including just being here or volunteering with us. Check the description of this video if getting involved sounds intriguing to you. We've got a link to who exactly we're looking for and what we might be needing at this particular time. And if you do donate, of course, thank you immensely for your support. You can see where our money goes in our publicly available financial reports each year. And those are on our website. You'll find them on actually the donate page just at the top. So with that, let's get into our event. Let me pull up the schedule for you. The schedule, just breakdown, maybe less pretty looking, is also in the description as well, so you can refer to it throughout the event. So let me share that. And there we go. So first, we'll be welcoming our first guest, Tessa the Poet. After that, we'll have a quick 5-minute break to set up a group Q&A. A bunch of you submitted questions for the OREA team to answer in this segment, so a few of us from the OREA team will be tackling those, as well as any live questions in chat that we can get into that time. Then I'll pass facilitation over to our other facilitator, who will introduce herself and welcome our second guest, Derelict Spectre. Then at the end, we'll conclude and let you know how much we raised this year. We'll give a final count after the event as well, just in case things sort of trickle in. We encourage you to chat with each other in chat or with us while you're here. Part of the point of this event is also just to be a big supportive hangout. So ask your questions to others, ask your questions to us, and we should be going till about 5 Eastern time. So for about 3 hours. All right, I'll stop sharing that briefly. There we go. Last bit of housekeeping before we start. This event is live, as you know. That means that even though many of us on camera and in chat are keeping things like swearing to a minimum, we might slip up and connection may get wonky. We may just have brain farts like I did at the very beginning. Anything can happen really to disrupt the event. So we might even see cats, which would be really exciting. We'd like to ask you basically to be respectful of us here on camera, our guests, as well as everybody in chat. OREA team members will be around in chat as well to help kind of moderate a little bit, but from what I saw last year, y'all are pretty chill. So keep being chill. I'm watching you. And I also hopefully welcome the cat appearances. So we'll see. Now, without further ado, I want to introduce our guest our very first guest. I'm going to make sure that that she is able to connect properly. And in the meantime, I'll tell you a little bit about her. So I mentioned that her name was Tessé. She is a self-described AAA. So that's Arrow and Ace and Agender. She is a poet and storyteller who will be showcasing some of her work and also talking about her experience of her identity in the cultural context that she lives in. So let me go see if we can, if we have her and can let her in. Stay tuned. There we go. All right, looks like we have Tessé in and just need video and audio. There's video. Yes. One of two. And we still.
Hello.
Yes. Oh, hello. Welcome so much.
Hi.
Oh my gosh. How are you doing, first of all? How are you?
I am doing well.
Excellent.
I am doing well. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, especially from pretty far away from me, at least. So big welcome. I remember when we chatted that we were going to let you kind of take the floor and present some of your work to us and talk about it, and then talk a bit about your identity. So, what would you like to start with?
Well, I could start off with thank you. So yeah, I could start off with just like a brief intro on myself, just to give people a bit of context for like my work and stuff as well.
Perfect.
So I'm Tessé. I'm a poet. And I'm really interested, especially in experimental poetry. I'm also Arrow Ace, and also agender. So, but I prefer she/her pronouns. So I'm quite excited to like talk about some of my work and share my work with you guys, because I'm a storyteller, and I'm also like really interested in like African folklore and African fairy tales, and just the ways in which we can use like these artifacts of childhood to kind of break them down in a way that is really informative, and also that kind of like reveals more context for the work. Like basically I love like exploring like embedded folklore in my work, and I'm really excited to be able to share that with all of y'all. So that would be really awesome.
We're excited too. You've got a yes in chat, by the way, so people are excited.
Yay, exciting. Thank you so much. So so that's just a bit about like the work that I do. I love like basically some of the pieces I'm going to share tonight are I'm going to start off with some African folktales. I'll be reading them from this book, and I'm going to be sharing some Nigerian ones, especially because I'm from Nigeria. And then I will kind of go into like some of my poetry, which typically kind of like fragments, like my most recent work, especially fragments like some of these folk tales that I'll be sharing, and then kind of like turns them into like, it breaks them up and breaks the language, and then it turns them into like kind of like a dark, traumatic, semi-nightmare like piece. So that's like what I love to do. And you'll see that in some of my work. So this is kind of, I'm hoping to start off with the folk tales because I hope that will kind of set the stage and give some context on the work that I do. So yeah, I'm excited.
Us too. I'm like, over here, just like, I'm very excited. Thank you for coming and sharing this as well. I'm really looking forward to it. Go right ahead. Go right into it. I'm not going to stop you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Mhm.
So first of all, I'm going to start off with this piece. It's called "Why There Are Cracks in Tortoises' Shells." So yeah, I basically for Nigerian folktales and for Nigerian stories, how we kind of have like a call and response practice at the beginning, because when you tell the stories, it's a whole communal event and a recounting. And so basically what I typically do is I start off by saying story, and then the response is story. And then I say once upon a time, and then your response is time. And
Ooh, okay.
so, yeah. And
Nice.
so basically it kind of shows that, that it's a communal storytelling, and like it shows that you're ready for the story. And so yeah, I try to start off with that. So if y'all are ready, I'm going to start off with that. Story, and then yay! And then once upon a time. Once upon a time. Great, awesome, thank you. All right, so the title of this story is "Why There Are Cracks in Tortoise's Shell." Mr. Tortoise, who was married to Mrs. Tortoise, had in Vulture a friend who was constant in visiting him. But having no wings, Tortoise was unable to return the visits, and this upset him. One day, he bethought himself of his cunning and said to his wife, "Wife." Mrs. Tortoise answered, "Hello, husband. What is it?" Said he, "Don't you see, wife, that we are becoming despicable in Vulture's eyes?" How despicable? Despicable, because it is despicable for me not to visit Vulture, my friend. He is always coming here, and I have never yet been to his house, and we are close. Mrs. Tortoise replied, "I don't see how Vulture should think us despicable unless we could fly, as he does, and then did not pay him a visit." But Mr. Tortoise persisted. "Nevertheless, wife, it is despicable." Said his wife, "Very well, then sprout some wings and fly and visit your friend Vulture." Mr. Tortoise answered, "No, I shan't sprout any wings because I was not born that way." "Well," said Mrs. Tortoise, "what will you do?" "I shall find a way," he replied. "Find it then," said Mrs. Tortoise, "and let us see what you will do." Later, Tortoise said to his wife, "Come and tie me up in a parcel with a lump of tobacco, and when Vulture arrives, give it to him, and say that it is tobacco to buy grain for us." So Mrs. Tortoise took some palm leaf and made him into a parcel and put him down in the corner. At his usual time, Vulture came to pay his visit and said, "Where's your husband gone, Mrs. Tortoise?" "My husband has gone some distance to visit some people, and he left hunger here. We have not a bit of grain in the house." Vulture said, "You are in trouble indeed, not having any grain." Mrs. Tortoise replied, "We are in such trouble as human beings never knew." And she went on, "Vulture, at your place, is there no grain to be bought?" "Yes," said he, "any amount." Mrs. Tortoise. So she brought the bundle and said, "My husband left this lump of tobacco, thinking you would buy some grain with it for us and bring it here." Vulture willingly took it and returned to his home in the heights. As he was nearing his native town, he was surprised to hear a voice saying, "Untie me, I am your friend Tortoise. I said I would pay a visit to you." But Vulture, in his surprise, let go his hold of the bundle, and down crashed Tortoise to the earth. Pidididi, pidididi. His shell smashed to bits, and he died. And so the friendship between Tortoise and Vulture was broken, and you can still see the cracks in Tortoise's shell.
Oh my gosh. I loved that, but it also made me so sad.
I know. So
Oh,
like I feel like that was like a really good example of like African folktales, because like sometimes you think about these things and you think, okay, like a lot of folk tales and fairy tales, like they like especially the original pre-Disney versions are like a bit messed up. Like they're a bit dark and they're a bit sad
yep.
and like they have some trauma baked into them. And then you're like, why are children like being told these stories? Because these stories are ostensibly for children, right?
Right, right.
Yeah. And so what I kind of like thought and what I've kind of like come across is that these stories are kind of a way for us to remember like significant experiences in our history as a community, as a society, and that these are ways, and like packaging them into like this form that's like a bit more palatable, acceptable really, and easy to remember and recall, makes it more likely for, first of all, for the children to remember and then to pass it on, but also for those stories and like hopefully even their origins to not be completely lost.
Right.
And so that's like kind of like my suspicion, and like my I guess my suspicion of why these stories can be a bit dark, a bit messed up.
Yeah, memorable, right? That way. No, that's true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was the end of our first story for the evening.
Excellent.
Yeah. So the next one that I would like to share with y'all, I think I will share The Leopard, the Squirrel, and the Tortoise. And so the thing about this one is that this is actually like the basis of like one of the poems that like I've written, that I'll be sharing like an excerpt from later, that I've written that is partially in my language. Which is a science and Nigerian language, and it's partially in English and a couple of other Nigerian languages kind of like interwoven in it. And yeah, so that's like so this is basically the source material for that poem. And so yeah, the title of the poem is The Leopard, the Squirrel, and the Tortoise. So many years ago, there was a great famine throughout the land, and all the people were starving. The yam crop had failed entirely. The plantains did not bear any fruit, and the corn never came to a head. Even the palm oil nuts did not ripen, and the peppers and okra also failed. The leopard, who lived entirely on meat, did not care for any of these things. And although some of the animals who lived on corn and the growing crops began to get rather skinny, he didn't really mind very much. However, in order to save himself trouble, since everybody was complaining of the famine, the leopard called a meeting of all the animals. He told them that, as they all knew, he was very powerful and must have food, that the famine did not affect him as he lived only on flesh, and that as there were plenty of animals around, he didn't intend to starve. He then told all the animals present at the meeting that if they themselves did not wish to be killed, they must bring their grandmothers to him for food. And that when the grandmothers were finished, he would feed off their mothers. The animals might bring their grandmothers in succession, and he would take them in turn, so that as they were many different animals, it would probably be some time before their mothers were eaten. By that time, it was possible that the famine would be over. But in any case, the leopard warned them that he was determined to have sufficient food for himself, and that if the grandmothers or the mothers were not forthcoming, he would turn upon the young people themselves and kill and eat them. For this, of course, the young generation who had attended the meeting had little liking, and in order to save their own skins, they agreed to supply the leopard with his daily meal. The first to appear with his aged grandma was the squirrel. The grandmother was a poor decrepit old thing with a mangy tail, and the leopard swallowed her at one gulp and then looked around for more. In an angry voice, he growled out, "This is not the proper food for me. I must have more at once. Then a bush cat pushed his old grandmother in front of the leopard, but he snarled at her and said, take the nasty old thing away. I want some sweet food. It was then the turn of a bush buck, and after a great deal of hesitation, a wretchedly poor and thin old doe tottered and fell in front of the leopard, who immensely dispatched her, and although the meal was very unsatisfactory, declared that his appetite was appeased for that day. The next day, a few more animals brought their old grandmas, until at last it was the turn of the tortoise. But because he was very cunning, he produced witnesses to prove that his grandma was dead, and so the leopard excused him. After a few days, all the animals' grandmothers were exhausted, and it was necessary that the mothers be sacrificed to supply food for the ravenous leopard. Now, although most of the young animals didn't mind getting rid of their grandmothers, whom they had scarcely ever known, of whom they were very fond, they had very strong objections to providing their mothers, of whom they're very fond, as food for the leopard. So they didn't feel like sacrificing their mothers, obviously, for the leopard's meal. The tortoise had, amongst some of the strongest objectors, were the squirrel and the tortoise. The tortoise had thought the whole thing out. As everyone knew that his mother was still alive, she being rather an amiable old person and friendly with everyone, he was aware that the same excuse would not work for him a second time. He therefore told his mother to climb up a palm tree, and he would provide her with food until the famine was over. He instructed her to let down a basket every day and said that he would place food in it for her. The tortoise made the basket for his mother, and he attached it to a long string of tie-tie. The string was so strong that she could haul her son up whenever he wished to visit her. All went well for some days, as the tortoise used to go at daybreak to the bottom of the tree where his mother lived and placed her food in the basket. Then the old lady will pull the basket up and have her food, and the tortoise would depart on his daily round in his usual manner. In the meantime, the leopard had to have his daily food. The squirrel's turn came first, after the grandmother's had been finished, and as he was a poor, weak thing, and not possessed of any cunning, he was forced to produce his mother for the leopard to eat. The squirrel was, however, very fond of his mother, and after she had been eaten, he remembered that the tortoise had not produced his grandmother or his mother for the leopard's food. He therefore determined to set a watch on the movements of the tortoise. The very next morning, while he was gathering nuts, the squirrel saw the tortoise walking very slowly through the bush, and being high up in the trees and able to travel very quickly, he had no difficulty in keeping the tortoise in sight without being noticed. When the tortoise arrived at the foot of the tree where his mother lived, he placed the food in the basket, which his mother had already let down by the tie-tie, and having got into the basket and given a pull at the string to signify that everything was all right, was hauled up, and after some time was let down again in the basket. The squirrel was watching all the time, and as soon as the tortoise had gone, he jumped from branch to branch of the trees, and very soon arrived at the place where the leopard was napping. When the leopard woke up, the squirrel said, "You have eaten my grandmother and my mother, but the tortoise has not provided any food for you. It is now his turn." And he had hidden his mother away in a tree. Hearing this, the leopard was very angry and told the squirrel to lead him at once to the tree where the tortoise's mother lived. But the squirrel said, "The tortoise only goes at daybreak when his mother lets down a basket. So if you go early in the morning, she will pull you up, and then you can kill her." To this, the leopard agreed. And the next morning, the squirrel came at cock crow and led the leopard to the tree where the tortoise's mother was hidden. The old lady had already let down the basket for her daily supply of food. The leopard got into it and gave the line a pull, but except for a few small jerks, nothing happened, as the old mother tortoise was not strong enough to pull a heavy leopard off the ground. When the leopard saw that he was not going to be pulled up, being an expert climber, he scrambled up the tree. When he got to the top, he found the poor old tortoise, whose shell was so tough that he thought she was not worth eating. So in a violent temper, he threw her down to the ground and then came down himself and went home. Shortly after this, the tortoise arrived at the tree and finding the basket on the ground, gave his usual tug at it, but there was no answer. He then looked about and after a little while came upon the broken shell of his poor old mother, who by this time was quite dead. The tortoise knew at once that the leopard had killed his mother and made up his mind that for the future he would live alone and have nothing to do with the other animals. The end.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. So a common thread in these stories is that one, the tortoise is typically seen as really cunning. I don't know if you've heard of like the Anansi stories, like
I have, yeah.
Anansi the spider. Yeah. So that like Anansi the spider is a similar character, but from Ghanaian folklore. And so like he's also seen to be very cunning and wise and like kind of like uses his like I guess experience with like the people and like with the other like you know animals in the kingdom and his knowledge and his wit to get him out of like difficult situations. And that's the same thing for the tortoise imagery in like Nigerian folklore. Like he's typically that same character, kind of like you often seen as like crafty and cunning, not really someone you want to be on your bad side, but not someone that you really trust either.
Right.
And
yeah.
yeah, so that's like, you know, a pretty typical like story. But what I kind of what I did with like this folklore is that I thought it was really interesting because it talked about the ways in which people kind of like relate to their parents. Like, you know, they talk only about mothers and grandmothers in this story, right? And like just in my like work in like my poems, in my most recent like collection of poems, I was kind of like exploring this idea of like the role of femme people, like femme perceived people in society and in Nigerian society, and like what that means for our continued existence with that society, our continued relationships, not just with the society at large, but also with younger femme people, whether it's like you know, children that we've given birth to that are also perceived as femme, you know, who may have been designated female at birth, and you know, and what that kind of like how that role affects like that intergenerational relationship and like storytelling and keeping of experiences. So that's like something that I kind of use this piece to explore, and so I will be sharing that a bit later. But now I'm gonna share some of my poems.
Yes, please.
So yay! So this is one of my poems. It's from like a chapbook that I made like 2-3 years ago when I started my master's program in poetry, in poetic practice, and it's called Shadows. And it basically uses like folktales. Like it was my first exploration into this whole idea of like folktales and fairy tales and nursery rhymes, and kind of like seeing how they can, you know, be used to explore childhood trauma. So yeah, so that was kind of like, this was my first experimentation and exploration of it. I made the book, it's wrapped in Ankara fabric, which is like a very common West African fabric in Nigeria. So yeah, it's like wrapped in it. And part of the reason I did that is because I remember that as a kid, I like had like, you know how like little kids have like their security blankets that like they kind of remove from like, yeah. So for me, that was like an Ankara fabric, an Ankara wrapper. What we call is a wrapper, right? And it's called a wrapper because it's like used to, like a piece of Ankara fabric, it's like used to like carry back children, to carry them on their back, on their parents' back when they're little. And so then I kind of like grew up with mine and used it as like my security blanket when I was like, you know, little, like 3 years old and stuff. And so I kind of like wrapped this book in it because that was like another piece of like, you know, childhood imagery, but that was specific to my culture. So yeah,
I love that connection.
The title is Shadows. Shadows. Yay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, look, here is like a little version. I made like, as a part of it, I made like a paper doll series.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah, so I made like this paper doll series because like their doll imagery features in some of the poems here that I'll be sharing. And then this little one in front has like the little wrapper, like wrapped around like the waist. And then it has like some of like the lines of the poem written on them in like white text. So yeah, so this is like, I put this as well in like the book, as in like, you know, around the case. So that was a part of like,
extra creativity. Yeah.
Thank you. So yes, so let me start off with this piece. It's called, I think I'll start off with Dear Mad Hatter. And this piece is like really important to me as an Arab person because it helped me it was kind of like a way of exploring the idea of marriage and like what that means within my culture and like what that means, what I've been told marriage means throughout my life in like, you know, in like whether it's from like, you know, like Disney movies or you know, like childhood folk tales or fairy tales or you know, just from seeing my family members and stuff. And so the title of this poem is called Dear Mad Hatter. Clitter, clatter. Dear Mad Hatter, dearest beloved, we are gathered here to hide ourselves in standards white and rivers that race through the night. Should I undo streetlights that shine bright onto iron-rich red stone painted green and white? So that was the first piece. Thank you. And and so that uses Alice in Wonderland imagery, of course, the Mad Hatter, and also just the idea of, you know, of like that whole, the language, that the kind of language that we use in like wedding imagery and marriage imagery and ceremony, and how that is an expectation and for a lot of people, and especially within like my culture, it's I will talk a bit more about like, you know, my relationship to my identity and how that kind of like exists within being an African person, a Nigerian person, but something that I just found really interesting is just how like there's that expectation, even if it's seen as a standard and an aspiration, but it's not really, even if it doesn't seem to fit other people that are embracing it around you. And that's something that like I kind of saw growing up, that it was seen as an aspiration and expectation, even though like I didn't have a lot of like positive imagery of people really like really fitting into like that happily ever after imagery that often is told with it. And so that kind of made me question it a bit more and actually be willing to, like, even within like a very young age, start questioning it and seeing if like whether I could reframe this imagery for myself, whether I could reframe this whole idea of marriage, and especially within a cishet at a romantic sense,
Right.
reframed that for me, and like how that could, you know, show up in my life in like a different way as I got older. So yeah, so that was just like
I think you nailed
kind
it.
of like a thank you. That was a jumping off point for that piece. So the next piece is titled Mother. So yeah, Mother. Drenched in this ethereal moonlight. Mother, may I go out to play tonight? The ghost of dolls haunt hallowed halls. Echoes of shrieks fill empty rooms. Bloodied belts, broken tombs. Many fell serving you. So that's Mother.
And that's like, oh, fizzy feelings. Oh my gosh.
Yes. So I definitely wanted to experiment with the whole doll imagery and the moonlight imagery, because in Nigeria, there was this show when I was like a little kid growing up that was called Tales by Moonlight. And it was basically it was to kind of mimic the whole idea of like moonlit nights being the setting for original storytelling, like back in the villages and stuff. And so that was kind of the like the imagery that I was evoking and recalling in this poem. Awesome. So yeah,
you've got lots of claps and woes, and love the way you tell stories in chat. By the way, people are really excited. So it's not just me, you know, being like, you're amazing, but other people are also really enjoying what you're talking about. So thank you for gracing us with it.
Thank you so much. And so this last piece that second to last piece from this collection that I want to share is called Shadows. And so it's the titular piece for this collection. And it's, so here, let me start. Shadows. Desire ripped me from your clutches, lured by the thrall of Titilaya, a promise of peaceful sunsets and endless days. The dawn breaks. Adewede. I arise and pray that I have not been force-fed falsehoods from Adam's veins. Would that I were spent in several ways. Investments kept for rain-filled days. Shadow turned silhouette, embracing me, encroaching, engulfing, swallow me whole until there is nothing left but footsteps, missteps, and folklore, and splintered doors, and shadows turned silhouettes that haunt old corridors. Thank you.
Oh gosh. Oh, shivers truly over here. Goodness, you have such a, I mean, I'm sure you hear this as a poet all the time, such a way with words, but no, truly, there's the imagery that you like bring into it. Like I can see like the vividness of it in the words that you use. So amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm glad you're enjoying it. You know, thank you. So I think I will like probably end my poetry segments with like just this excerpt that I referenced earlier. like about the piece that is rooted, you know, in that folk tale that I mentioned earlier.
Excellent.
So it's the title of this poem is Daughter Sins. I just got a notification that my internet connection was not stable, so I want to make sure that I can be heard. Am I good?
You're okay. Yes, you're good.
Okay, great. Awesome. All right. So the title of this poem is Daughter Sins, and it incorporates some Asa, which is my language in Nigeria.
Awesome.
Daughter Sins. Many years ago, there was a great famine throughout the land, and all the people were starving. The yam crop had failed, the plantains bore no fruit, the groundnuts shriveled up, and the corn had no head. There was no food. The leopard demanded to be fed. Grandmothers and mothers were sacrificed for their young. The tortoise tried to keep his mother safe, and for that she suffered, not eaten, but discarded. Discarded, she was discarded. She was killed. She died. Ọmọ nimebie, we, remebie, yiwe. The child that I have borne, I bore you, bear me, where are you? Ọmọ nimebie, we, remebie, yiwe. Ọmọ nimebie, we, remebie, yiwe. Mama, I see great famine, land all starving. Mama, help me. Mama, yam field, plantain, remebie, yiwe. No fruit, remebie, nimebie, where remebie, yiwe. Shriveled up, mama, shriveled up, headless, mama, yiwe, remebie, yiwe. Where are you? Mama did not ripen, mama, enunciate, where, yiwe, gave out. Predator lived on. Mama did not ordered, did not to save himself, lived on beef. Remebie, mama, lived on powerful must. Famine, affect, farming, affect, famine, did not intend, mama. Remebie, yiwe, bring, starve, grandmothers, then mothers. Mama, feed, off, mothers, bring, grandmothers in succession. Mama, remebie, yiwe, Mama, where are you? The end.
Oh my gosh. Oh. Oh, tell us about this. Tell us about this more.
All right. So earlier on in the piece, I tried to establish the difference between, like, basically the language that I'd be using. So the Ọmọ nimebie, like, and then the whole part that I described with, like, you know, the child that I've born, that is the English translation of those words. And basically it's discussing and addressing this whole relationship of mother and daughter, or mother and, you know, like mother role, femme role, and that whole that perceived role in society of femme people, and what they're expected to be in society, and how that is supposed to be passed on to their children. especially if the children are perceived as femme people, designated as female in birth, like what that means, what that trauma that they have experienced within that role in society, how that also influences their relationship with their children, and
Right.
how that is passed on and baked into their relationship and baked into our society and baked into the stories that we tell about mothers. And even when it seems that you are embracing or stating that, oh, this person, that occupies this mothering role in society, even in that praising, there is a tint of expected sacrifice, of expected suffering. And that is, an admiration for strength in the face of suffering, and in the face of sacrifice. And so it's a very it's speaking to that complicated relationship, and how that complicated relationship is passed on from mother to child, from parents to child over time, especially if they both occupy that role of perceived nurturer within society. Right. So that's like basically what I was exploring in that piece, and what kind of stood out to me in that folktale, because these are stories that we tell kids, we like a little child sitting down and is expected to see their mother as someone who is going to sacrifice for them, who would give up their life for them. And that may be the case, but that expectation, what does that do to the person in that role? Right. How does that affect how they see themselves, and how does that affect how they grow and what they pass on to people,
It's so heavy.
So that's what that poem was kind of exploring. And now to kind of like talk a bit more about my experience as an an African Afro-Ace person. Interesting.
Hey, I like that. I like it.
I didn't even think, but I like it. Like as an African Ace person in Nigeria. So basically, when I was like a little kid, I remember being 7, 8, and of course I also grew up, I grew up partially in America, for a lot of my childhood, and so I watched and was socialized with all that, Disney movies and all that kind of stuff as well. And so I would look at all of these Disney movies, and then the whole idea of happily ever after, and the excitement of the wedding and all that kind of stuff, it just never really resonated with me. Even from the age of 7 and 8, I would be I just don't see what is so exciting, or I just could not see myself in that role. I could not see myself. And I think that is what really made me start to question this whole idea of what I now know as normativity, but just that whole idea of alloromanticism and what that means in our society, and what that means in African society. It's an idea of stability. It's an idea of of supposed stability, but also not seen as a necessity, because even to this day, it's the romantic love is not really it's still a relatively new idea that it has to be the reason that you get married. Right. A lot of people up until relatively recently, a lot of marriages were really just between they were more of a coming together of families, and there was a focus on that whole family bonding and communal joining, and less about, oh, I'm in love with this person, whatever that means, and that's why we're going to get married, and so, but of course now it's a lot more popular to kind of subscribe to those ideals in Nigerian society. But even within my own family, and within my extended family, I come from a really big extended family. And even within my extended family, I still don't see I've not really seen a lot of that whole perpetuation of that, of the idea that, oh, I'm in love with this person, and that's why we're still married. It's more we have a family together, we made a commitment to stay together, and that is why we are staying together. And so as I grew older, like as I got older, I started, trying to like experiment, of course, kind of like go through that whole idea of like, why don't I feel this way about people? How come it's easy for me to like, claim I have like a crush on this person, a romantic crush on that person, but then I can also switch off those feelings. Like that was
So
like
easily,
really,
right? Yeah.
yeah, it's like, what do you mean? Like I had conversations with like friends and I was like, what do you mean you can't just stop liking someone? That seems odd. Like, what do you mean?
That seems annoying, right? Like, oh
This is
gosh.
annoying. I can't relate to that. I don't know what y'all are on, but like and and then as I got older, it just kind of like got to the point where I was like, I think it was like in my early 20s. Yeah, I started like realizing, like this whole idea of like romantic dating and stuff, it's not really appealing to me. Even like, like thinking back to when I was like, 7 and 8, I would like think of myself and like think about how I never had the whole idea of like dreaming of a wedding or a day of all that kind of stuff, or even like even then I was like, oh, like, maybe it might be cool to have like a companion, like, like a best friend that I like live with and like go on with. That came from, this is me, a Nigerian girl, like perceived Nigerian girl living in like Nigeria with no idea of anything outside of the world that I've been made to like, believe in, already being like, maybe a queer platonic relationship would be great.
Yeah, that's earlier than a lot of us. Like, geez, dang.
And I had no words for it. I had no words for it, no frame of context, no relationship like that I had ever explicitly seen. And yet that's what I desired at that young age. And so when I got older, like, I like over time, like in my early 20s, I started exploring, learning a bit more. And then it was really when I turned like, I think I found out that I was ace earlier on, because like it was kind of like easier to just be like, yeah, this does nothing for me.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't experience this, like this whole appeal of sexual attraction. It's just not something I don't understand.
And that's pretty common,
like,
right? From what I hear, like sometimes it happens that way for a lot of people who are in both the arrow and ace spaces, right? So that makes sense.
To like, experience, to know first that they're ace, right? Yeah. But then I like started thinking a bit more, and like I was like, yeah, but it's more than that as well. It's like, it's not just that like, it's not just that I don't have sexual attraction, like romantic attraction, like the way I feel about people, I like, I can like, I feel very deeply about some people, but it's never really like romantic. Like I'm a very physically, I'm very touch positive. Like I'm a very sensual person. Like I love hugs, I love cuddles, and that's my love language. But I could very also easily tell the difference between that and like romantic attraction and stuff like that. It because I think as well, like, the more I read up on like sexual attraction, romantic attraction, and all that kind of stuff, it started to make a lot more sense. And then I came across, aromanticism, and that's when it like really hit me around like the age of 26, really.
Yeah.
That's when I realized
from
like,
8 to 26, right? And you're like, oh wow.
Yeah, from 8 to 26. I'm like, so that's what this is. Fantastic. Love that for me. So
amazing.
Yeah, so that was like really exciting, and so like after like, I came to that like realization, I kind of did the same thing I did when I like started exploring like feminism and learning more about it, is that I just joined like, some arrow groups on Facebook, and just like got more involved in the arrow community on Twitter and follow some people, and I was like, okay, yeah, this definitely resonates. This definitely feels like where I belong. This feels like my place. And
you're kind of like your people,
and it helped me a lot. Yes, my people, and speaking my language, which is amazing, because I think, because it's not really something that is very very often like in our society still, it's like it's still expected. There's still that expectation of romanticism and just the expectation that, you know, that like romantic love plays such a strong, like has such a chokehold on like so much media in our society. And so it was still difficult to you know, to kind of like come to terms with like what that could be for me, like what my life could look like knowing that I'm Aro Ace. And so I think like one thing that was really helpful for me was also like seeing the relationships that exist in my family already, and like you know, and just like seeing that like, you know, like marriage doesn't look the same for everyone, you know. And like in my family there are a lot of people who may, like my parents did not like, were not together their whole marriage because my dad was working and away for like several years of like my childhood, you know. And so like even though my parents were like, you know, they would talk often and stuff like that, it showed me that like that marriage can exist and love can look different ways, and marriage can exist in different ways. And so that started helping me to kind of like say, okay, like I do want that whole, you know, I do want a partner like the way that, you know, I dreamt of way back when I was like, you know, 8 years old. But what would that partnership look like, and what could that exist like? And so I just, by being more honest with myself and honest with who I am as a person, I try to be that way in like in my relationships and stuff. And I was that way. I think I had Aro Ace in my I don't even know if I have it in my Twitter profile bio anymore, but I did then. And I started like dating seeing my partner at that time around like, I think I was like 27. So this was about a year into being Aro, knowing that I'm Aro, and identifying like, you know, being out as well, like saying that I am and like posting on my Twitter profile. And so he saw that like in my profile, and like knew that like, oh, okay, like, so when I was like, you know, like engaging with him and talking with him, he was like, I don't know what this means.
Tell me what this means.
Do you just want to be friends? Like, is that what you? I was like,
oh no.
I know. And I was like, no. I what kind of like drew me to him is like shared common values, worldviews, and similar you know, interest, and also just like his personality, his openness, his intelligence, and also just like, you know, like I had like this like altruist attraction. I had altruist attraction to him. And so like just like a desire to know him better, deeper, more intimately, and also to kind of like, you know, and then that combined with kind of like my worldview and stuff, that allowed me to like be in this partnering. And of course we've had to like navigate relationships within that space. But I do think that like there is like that, so what my relationship and what my vision for my life is going to be like moving forward as an Aro Ace person has been a lot of like finding language that like, you know, helps me understand more about myself, and then everything else like in terms of like how to be in relationship, how to see like my life and what it could be like, has really been kind of like a figuring out based off of like the society and the structure that I live in, the, you know, the African society that I live in, and like the people that I am in community with, you know, online, as well as like the people that I know, like, you know, like my extended family, and what and how to kind of like exist in that framework, but in a way that is authentic to who I am as a person. And so that's just kind of like been like my guiding light in this process. And I definitely love, you know, this opportunity that I've had to like talk with you guys and to share a bit of myself. But if there's any like questions or anything I could answer, anything, feel free to ask. But I hope that's been helpful.
To me, absolutely. I really like your point, especially about like having the stories of your culture now now being able to take the language that you do know and the experiences of your culture, which aren't necessarily like the same as like my experiences where I live, right? Where marriage, like it is kind of sometimes romantic love, but it's often what you see around you is it's not, right, necessarily. So like being able to have all of those diverse experiences and then being able to throw them together and have them kind of support your identity, like formation and development, like that's so cool. And I love being able to hear that like, you know, there are experiences out there that like these are very specific experiences that someone might also share, right? And a lot of people in chat also are saying like big mood, like, yep, this is very, I'm the same way with sensual attraction, for example, and taking a long time to find out identity. And one question that we have, since we're pretty much at the end of your time, but one question is, where can we find more of your work? Because we love it and we want to see more of you, and you know, ask you questions later. Tell us.
Yay. Well, thank you. So you can find more of my work. Like, well, I think the best place would be to like connect with me like on like Twitter. And then I could like kind of like I want to make like a new like social media platform that is like I want to make a new social media like headquarters that has like links to all of my stuff. But I'm like published in like a couple of different places. Like I'm published like online in a couple of different places. I also have like a YouTube account, but it's going to be kind of hard to like share all that stuff now. So if you just follow me on Twitter, I will definitely make sure that there's like an identifiable place to find my work. But yeah, I really appreciate this time and thank you. I think the work that y'all do is so important. I am so grateful for folks like you, because without y'all, I don't know if I would have ever found this language. Like I'm so glad, honestly. It's yes, the community is great. I love
it's why we do it, right? And we get to hear from people like you and others to like better our language over time as well, like to make it even more like inclusive of all the kinds of arrows from all the kinds of places. So Tessé on Twitter is Tessé the Poet, if I recall correctly. So
yes,
TESETHEPOET. So yes, go give her a bunch of appreciation. And now we'll yeah, thank you so much for coming. We'll say goodbye to you for now from here, and get set up for a Q&A coming next with some of the Aurea team members. So stay tuned. And thank you so much, Tessé, for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great rest of your evening. I think it is in your time zone. So yes.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great rest of your day. I will be watching. See you later.
Excellent. All right, cheers. I love that. That's so cute. All right, we're going to take a quick break and then get everybody in the Aurea team in the chat, and we'll be back shortly. So thanks all. Welcome back. Hopefully I'm not actually on mute. Yes, okay, we're good. Welcome back, everybody. We just took a quick 5-minute break to make sure all the tech was going good. So as I mentioned just before this, we're going to be getting into a Q&A with the Aurea team. So there's myself who is here, and there are also a couple other Aurea team members who will be on with me. So I invite them to come on in with their video and their audio and just introduce themselves. Welcome both. Who wants to go first?
I can get started.
Sure.
I'm excited to be here. I'm Anyang, and I'm the Aurea volunteer onboarder. I use she, her, or am pronouns. Yeah, I'm just very glad to be part of this today.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Darcy. I'm also hosting this next. You'll have more of me soon. I am the editor-in-chief. I'm aromantic and bisexual, and my pronouns are she, her.
Awesome. Well, thank you to both of you for coming. And as mentioned right at the very beginning of this stream, we got a bunch of questions just from folks in the aromantic community for us as an organization. And we have a nice list of them here that each of us will take turns reading out and answering. I know that we're running a bit over time, so we'll try to end this at the time it was supposed to be at, but just in case, if there are other questions, you can always email us or ping us on social media and we'll be able to get to those. Okay, so first question. I think Anyang, you've got that one.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. All right, so our first question, what's the best way to find or organize in-person aromantic meetups or groups? This online community is wonderful, but it can still be tough to not have more local community.
Yeah, it's like it's the age-old difficulty, right? Of just, especially we're an online organization, so how do we make things in person? How do we find them? Who wants to start? I guess I can say some things. Darcy, you can say some things.
Yeah. Well, I think the first article we put out was on community building. We do have
That's right.
So a resource for that if you're interested. But that relies on you being willing, able, having the connections to start your own group, which is something everyone can do. It does have a lot of good information in it, which one of the main thing is, from what I remember, is do not do it on your own. You don't do it on your own. You need a support network. Even if those people aren't aromantic, you need to be doing the work with someone, and you need to just make sure that's something new. Oh, I think one of the other things was if you can start with a queer group of any sort and start to having, say, a meeting every once in a while, once a month, say, just for ASPEC people, and then build from there. I think that's a good solid foundation to start with.
Yeah, that's a good idea too, because you can start that off with like Arrow 101 also, which there are lots of resources out there on that. You can, steal people's presentations from the online sphere or from elsewhere, and pamphlets and things that give you a bit of 101 that you can use in that kind of like discussion group. And then from there, you can keep going and hope that there are other arrows around. That's kind of like the other hard part.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tricky too. I remember when we were talking with another one of our Aurea team members on this, that it's difficult in those spaces, even in queer spaces or ASPEC spaces, to plan for meeting every arrow's needs, right? Like the arrow aces and the aloe arrows and the arrows that like they're just arrows and they want to talk about their own thing, or every kind of intersection of arrow that there is. Sometimes it's hard to plan to be able to meet everybody's like repulsion, right? Like whether they're romance repulsed or sex repulsed, like have conversations with them without alienating the others. So there's also that to keep in mind. It can be tough out there, but when you do it, like Darcy said, not being alone is great, and trying to keep in mind everybody's like needs, I guess, in this space is also a good way to start. Because if you say outright, we're having an Arrow 101 session, or we're having an Arrow discussion group as part of this LGBT, for example, space, and we're going to be talking about these topics, it's probably more likely that you'll get arrows to come. If you don't have information about some of the topics that will be being discussed, they might be afraid that you'll discuss something that they don't really want to discuss, right? So there's that little tidbit I'd like to throw out there as advice as well. So
yeah, beyond starting your own, we do have a resource page, I believe, that does have a list of certain groups that are currently running, some online, some I think some of them are still in person. I should hope so, at least.
Yeah, we have it on our resources page in the in-person like groups, in-person community organizations. They exist all over the world, and if you look at those and find ones we've missed, do let us know, because that's a place to start. All right, any other? Go ahead.
It is possible. So we recently had someone email us that they managed to set up a group for younger. So I think it was 18 18 under in New York. So even during this COVID pandemic and everything, they managed to create an in-person group. So it's hard work, but it is possible.
Yeah. Thank you, Anya. It's always nice to have like success stories also. Like people have done it before. It's okay. It's tricky, but you're not the only one who's done it. So hopefully that helps. Any other thoughts on that before we move on? All right, I see those aren't head nods, head shakes. So we'll continue. The next question we have, which was a really cute question, is what's your happiest memories about the organization? Who wants to kick that off?
Yeah, I will. I do have I wouldn't say happy. I just have a general happy feeling when I think about Aurea. The team is fantastic. The work they do is really inspiring. Yeah, if you ask me how I feel about Aurea, I would say, happy, content. What a good
That's
thing.
good. We're treating you well.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
Mhm.
Like that. For me, I think like, when we launched was a happy moment, right? And not all of our current team members were there when we did launch at the beginning. But that was a happy moment for me, being here for all that time. It's just kind of like finally, and I get really happy also when we receive any kind of feedback. It's like, oh, people have opinions about what we're doing, right? Like whether it's like good feedback, like, yay, I loved your resources, they were really helpful. Things like what Tessa was saying just now, like, oh, you helped me out. Like that's always really heartwarming.
Oh yeah.
But also I'm happy, after initially being like worried, I do get happy after people send in like negative feedback or constructive feedback, because then I'm like, first I'm like, oh no, we're not doing well. But then after that initial part, I'm like, oh, people actually care so much to send us their emotions, like emotion-filled feedback. And they want to make this space better. So it's like, like that's what we were trying to do as well. Like connect everybody together and be a resource for as many people as possible. So those are some times where I feel happy with the organization.
Yeah, I second those. If I were to think of like a particular moment. And I mean, I still haven't even been part of the team for a year, but
Right.
I really enjoyed the first social I took part in, and it was also with a broader volunteer group, which was a lot of fun. So yeah, Darcy and I talked to some volunteers about ArrowWorks, which was super nice to like explore the different themes and get the different people's opinions on it. And then the next day, Nair hosted some games, which is also a lot of fun to do with the other volunteers. So just getting that social element on top of just all the work that we do, which I find exciting, and also getting the feedback. So it's nice to have those connecting moments.
I love that. All right. Our next question, Darcy, you have this question to ask, so go for it.
Okay. So what specifically are you doing to diversify your outreach in regards to, say, research, input, or representation, those kinds of things?
All right.
What are we doing?
Who wants to start? I could give it a go if you'd like, unless you have something right on the top of your head, Anya.
Well, the thing I can think of right now is our outreach stuff. So
yeah,
we have our outreach manager who has been, over the past couple of months, been reaching out to organizations from different countries. So there's the ACES and Nigerian group, which we've been having a lot of contact with. And then it also makes me think about with the census, for example, how we've gotten feedback with the last iteration that for example, the race ethnicity categories were pretty US centric. So now we're going to try and expand and get feedback and testers from arrows in different locations so that we can make it more locally and culturally appropriate. So we're really trying to create those partnerships with different organizations to diversify the kind of input that we get and newsfeed as well. So
right.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah, I know that Darcy's been trying to get more like outreach to people that we might not usually see in our spaces, right? Because each of us is in a particular space, but we might have a bunch of biases in those space already in terms of membership. So like whenever people give feedback on something, right? Like trying to say, hey, would you be interested in like maybe talking about this more?
Oh, yeah. Anytime someone talks to us, I'm like, what can I do with this?
Yeah. It's great. I love your strategic brain in that way. But it's also great because it's like we're always learning as a team as well. And the more team members that we have kind of on our core team, the more like we can use those networks as well to expand. So that's been really nice. So yeah. Those are some things I can think of. Also in our team recruitment, right? Like having very specific things that we're looking for. And also if you look at our page for recruiting, you'll see like specific folks that we're missing, right? Like, oh, our team has good representation on these fronts, but we're missing people with these voices. So we want to prioritize those as we're going forward. Like I think one of our newest team members actually reached out to us because they saw those things as experiences we were missing. So that's been helpful. Just a small thing that we can put out that others can see and reach out for. So
yeah. And we also just recently started our community accountability group, which can also really help to keep us on track and with these diversifying our outreach.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that a lot because it's like, I don't know, it makes us feel like more official somehow or like bigger. So I'm really looking forward to it. Okay, are we ready to move on to our next question? All right.
Yeah.
So kind of related to the previous question, but what diverse or intersectional areas do you feel are currently underrepresented in your efforts? And how do you plan to change this in the future?
Well, as we said, we do have it on the website, specifically who we're looking for. Every once in a while, we tend to, when it comes to recruitment, we do tend to do everyone on the team go out and have a look around. Who have you seen? Who's doing interesting things? Who have you seen that would be, would like maybe fill in some of the gaps we're missing? And yeah, that usually works pretty well. Also, if it doesn't, if people don't want to join us, we still make connections. People are yeah, that's in terms of recruitment at least. For interviews, yeah, like Nat was saying before, it's not hard to find people, especially writers. There's a lot of aromantics who are out there writing, stories. There's the Carnival of Arrows. People are always writing for that one. Yeah, but if people want to be found, they're usually pretty easy to find.
Yeah, it is nice that way. Some of the people that Darcy was mentioning on our website, we have Who Are We Looking For? Some of those people we can say like right now is Arrows of Color, arrows over the age of 30. We have a pretty young skewing team with a few people who are thankfully, older than 30, but actually maybe a couple people now that I think of it over the 30. Then also, like as Anyang was saying before, arrows from like countries that are not America and also not English dominant, right? Also arrow men and trans femme arrows and arrows from a kind of wide variety of religious backgrounds. Like that's something that we're missing as well. So if any of those described you, just reach out to us if you can, but also we might reach out to you, like Darcy was saying. We try to incorporate more of that, like more and more, right? So yeah. What else? What else can we think of? Oh, we also have like an organizational chart that I think was shared in the last Inside Aurea that talked about like how we're doing in terms of like diversity and like anti-oppression and our organizational practices relating to that. So that's something that you can find and see, right? Like it's kind of like a rubric in a way, right? It lists each kind of item and then how we might be doing on those items. I suspect the community accountability group would help us a lot more, like when it comes to that as well, because it's hard to do self-analysis, right? Because you can either be kind of too mean to yourself or like not even notice the ways that you're not serving certain arrows. So there's also that we've been incorporating more recently, right? I think Anyang, that was like a big project of yours to put together. So yeah. I don't know if there's anything else that we haven't covered. We can otherwise we can move on to our next question. We have quite a few. So go for it then. I think Darcy, you have the next one.
Yeah, it's Darcy.
Yeah, it is. This question is, would you consider assembling and or displaying a list of historical figures who are potentially aromantic or just generally aspec, and on what qualities would you base the list on?
Yeah, highly specific question, this one.
It is.
Yeah, I know when we talked about it kind of offline, well, online, but not live, I guess I should say. We talked about like in theory, right? When you think of that, like, oh, that's kind of neat, right? That kind of idea, like having almost historical representatives of your identity that you can sort of see and point to as, hey, like we've existed for longer than the word aromantic existed, right? Or we've existed for longer than like 2001 or something, right? But at the same time, it's like there are ethical issues, I guess, with that as well. Like like labeling someone sort of, I never pronounce this word correctly, posthumously, yes.
Yeah, posthumous. Yeah.
Thank you. So that one, it's sort of not our place. Like we can always think about it, and it's a fun
Right.
exercise. But
Yeah.
any other thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, the ethics, it would be almost like headcanoning someone, their sexuality, and they're not around and they didn't choose a label for themselves, so it can get complicated. And there are many figures also in history who are a bit what we would consider nowadays queer coded, but it could, a lot of different groups might see it in a different way. So it could be quite difficult, and you also have to take into account the historical context, which at that time it might have been something that wasn't necessarily queer or aromantic. It was just part of the times, so it can become very complicated quickly.
Right. Layer on that, people from places that we don't, like cultures and places that we don't live in, right? It's like, oh, we don't have all the context in terms of culture, time, place, right, to be able to place them. So awesome. So I guess short answer, no. I mean, but
I
here's
would add
why.
also that as an organization, if we would have put out a list of historical figures we consider aromantic, people would take that as gospel and would start saying they are aromantic when we don't know that, and it would be a messy situation. I have seen this week someone putting together a list of historical figures because it is something people desire, but it's not for us.
All right. Moving on to the next question. Go for it, Anu.
How do you share the transparency of your fundraising efforts to the public so we can clearly see how the money is being used?
Very short answer that I mentioned earlier as well. We've got a financial record. So if you go to the donate page, which you can find in the description, at the very top, it'll say financial record, and there's a link to it. It's a Google Doc that we update every year. So you can see exactly how much we've raised, what we used it for, if we have any left over, what we use that for. So check that out. Yeah. Next, yeah. Luckily, it is easy. It is not hidden. You could find it easily. All right. So next question is, would you consider training some people in an outreach program so they can engage their communities with aromantic education? So this can be informing people of how to be more inclusive in workplaces, like aro inclusive sex ed, and etc. Like even things like not speaking derogatorily towards us and using correct language. Would you consider training?
I think it would be awesome, but it's, I think, out of our capacity at the moment, especially since I learned this new word recently, stopgap organization. That's we kind of can help other organizations do these sorts of things. But it would be a lot of logistics for us, at least right now. But there are existing resources out there on how to, like what kind of things you can say or you shouldn't say to arrows, basic 101 pamphlets, and we do have like our resources page with pamphlets. We even have like a beginner's guide to being an aromantic ally, which contains some of these do's or don'ts when talking to arrows and how to be a good ally. So something that might be more in our scope would be compiling those resources, or maybe putting those together into a pamphlet specifically for outreach that others can then take and then do their own training. But there really are quite some resources out there already, because the aro community is fantastic like that, and people just make these things on their own, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's so lovely to see. It's just like, it's part of why I love updating our resources page so much. I'm just like, yeah, look at them go. Like, it's That was just great. I feel like a proud parent almost. That was pretty comprehensive on you. Anything to add, Darcy? I can't think of anything.
No, just summing up what Young said is the resources are there, but we couldn't do the training. Not right now. It is when we had the question, we were all very excited by it. It is something that we're interested in, but it would probably take a specific group within the team of people who are dedicated to that, because it's on one hand it's very like we could just stick to the 101 stuff, but as the question mentioned, you can go more specific to, like, so if you want to talk specifically about, during sex or gender, those kinds of things, it would be a lot of work. Something we are interested in but cannot do right now.
Feel free to approach us if you are interested, because we can lend our support for sure. So yeah. And finally, I think this is our last question that we got. So if you have any questions burning, feel free to throw them in the chat, because we do have a few more minutes. This one was interesting. It says, I often hear that an arrow person can only love a partner like a friend. It seems harmful to me because partner love does not have to be romantic and can be other than friendly. Do you agree with this point? One thing that we came up with when reading this question is that there are like kind of a lot of things going on in this question. We'd love to touch on every single one of those and all of the assumptions and things like that, but ultimately we're going to have to answer this question in the way that we understood it. So the question we're hearing is, I often hear that an arrow person can only love a partner like a friend. That seemed like the core of the question, and it seems harmful to do so. Is that something that we agree with? Go for it, either of you, if you want to tackle it.
Yeah, I think you can go at this from multiple angles, because you can look at it very, on a simpler way and say, okay, because then you could be potentially leaving out the Romo arrows, or what is partnership? What kinds of attractions are there in partnerships, or love, or different kinds of loves in partnerships? So, in that way, it can be harmful to, I guess, stereotype that arrows can only love people like a friend. But then you can also say, well, why is loving someone like a friend necessarily, not enough on its own, or
right, or love required at all, right? Like for the loveless arrows out there, it's like, well, or non-partnering arrows as well. Just like this kind of question is sort of not even relevant at all. So there are lots of kinds of love, right? Lots of not kinds of love as well, right? Like not loving. Like a friend can be, you can have a partnership with someone who you love like a friend, and it's, great. And in other cases, it's not. So yeah, there's a lot. It's like, yeah, we agree that this point seems sort of harmful because it narrows down, like you said, on Young, and stereotypes arrows. But there's a lot going on also that we wanted to address. So yeah. Any last thoughts, Darcy? We covered it. We're amazing. Awesome. Great. Well, we just got to 3:45 Eastern time, which is right at the end of our time. But I don't see any questions in chat. So hopefully, if you have any follow-ups, you can ask us anytime through our feedback places, through email, through social media, etc. And thank you so much to the people who did ask questions, because these were good. A mix between like some really nice celebratory questions and also like really deep down, like, what are we doing? So thank you for everybody who asked and may ask in the future. Yeah, with that, I think we'll take another quick break, and then Darcy has the floor, and you won't be seeing me anymore, and she'll take you through the second half of this. Thank you, Anyang, for coming in as well for this Q&A, especially as like a representative of the newbies to the team,
Yeah.
right? It's really nice to have you around as well. So yeah, with that, let's go to break and see you all in 5-ish minutes.
Thanks, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Great. Okay, that was fun. I enjoyed doing that Q&A, and I liked hearing Tessa the poet speak as well. It's been good. We're going to be going into our next guest now. We have an artist coming for you. I'll just reiterate, my name is Darcy. My pronouns is she, her. I am the editor-in-chief. I have been so since right since the beginning. I've been running the newsfeed this whole time. Jason, who is our guest coming on, is someone we've interviewed previously and we wanted more of. So Jason is an artist who goes by Derelict Spectre as their artist name. He is a character artist. He is oriented arrow ace, and his pronouns are he, him, and his. And I think if he's ready to go, we'll bring him on now. Oh, might just need some time. Yeah, we'll just take a bit of time. How's ASAW been for everyone so far? Been having a good time? I'm really looking forward to the Arrows, Carnival of Arrows responses. This topic is on community. I'm looking forward to hearing what people have to say. I might write something myself. We'll see if I have time. This is the last day of ASAW for me. I am in Australia.
Hello, Darcy and everyone
Oh,
in the
great.
chat.
Great.
I'm here. Hello, hello.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
Great. I'm great.
All right. Well, hello to everybody in the chat. I just want to say before I get started, thank you so much to everybody at Aurea for inviting me. I'm super excited to be working with you guys once again. Another thing too, I also want to give special thanks to everybody, all my friends that have been advertising this and supporting me through this. Seb, I know you've been pushing this really hard. My brother Sky, Alcina and Skylar, another couple of other friends if they're in the chat now. But yeah, and then about me, for anybody that doesn't know me, my name is Jason. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an oriented arrow ace. And yeah, I draw and I also play video games, but I also draw. So I will share my screen. I'm going to be turning my camera off, and if you guys have any requests that you want to do, I'll be drawing your requests, and if I don't have any requests, then I'll just kind of be drawing whatever while I speak about what I'm going to be talking about. So let me get that going. All right. One second. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Let me hop back in the chat. All right. Let me see. Okay, yeah, I see that everyone can see my screen now.
Yep.
All right. All right, cool. So as I said
Oh.
before, yeah, I did a little banner.
That's so great.
Yeah. Well, as I said before, if anyone has any requests, I could take some requests, but if not, I'll be working on some random doodles in the meantime while I speak.
Perfect.
So, yeah. All right. So, just to begin, what I wanted to speak upon was mostly just my characters and how I write my characters and how I write my experiences through my characters, both as an oriented arrow ace as well as, a Black and South Asian oriented arrow ace. So my first theme I'm going to be talking about is just the diversity of aromanticism and how aromanticism I feel is really just a spectrum. Like there's no one way to correctly be arrow ace. I mean, you have some arrows who are romance positive, some who are romance like repulsed and who don't want to engage in romance at all. It's just there's so much more to aromanticism than what meets the eye. And while I talk about that, I'll talk about how this manifests that in my characters. So just as a preface, I wanted to define romance before I get started. Since I feel a lot of people have different ideas of romance and how it can manifest. And just in my personal experience, I kind of feel romance and what can be considered romantic for me would just be consistent of what's consented between the two parties or however many parties are engaging in romance. So, for example, my character Jason, he's also an oriented aro ace, and let's say he were to do something like go out to dinner. If he were to go out to dinner with his brother, for example, that would not be considered romantic because it's his brother. It's just we're not doing that. But if he were to go out with somebody that he would consider to be his I saw sorry, I just saw that somebody requested an Aro Ace Fairy, so I'll see if I can do that. I just have to look up a couple of references for that, but yeah, so basically, if Jason were to go out with another character who would be like a romantic interest, such as one of my other characters, Farron, uh, that would be considered romantic because that's what they both consented to. So now we'll actually get into the crux of what I wanted to talk about here. So Jason, my character, is an oriented aro ace. He likes romance, but he doesn't really prioritize it in relationships. Um, and basically, being in relationships is not like an end all be all for him. Like he would like to be in one, but it's not really his end goal. He navigates his orientation pretty much almost exactly as I do. Um, aside from some minor differences, because he's my persona, but he's still not me. So on the flip side, even though he doesn't prioritize romance, he's totally fine with being in a romantic relationship, and if that's what his partner wants, he's definitely going to engage in that. Meanwhile, you have my character Connor, who is aro ace, just flat out aro ace. He's also a platonic and doesn't really experience squishes or feel any sort of desire to be in a committed relationship. It's not a matter of that he doesn't want any friends in terms of being a platonic. It's just that he's just not really willing to be in a committed relationship, and that's okay too. So they're both aromantic, but they also just both experience aromanticism differently. Jason still enjoys and engages in romance, while Connor doesn't engage in it at all and isn't even interested in it. So I really want to drive like the diversity of aromanticism in both of these characters by um, just highlighting the two extreme ends of the spectrum of aromanticism, if that makes sense. People who might want to engage in romance and people who might not, and people who are not willing to be partnered. And that's really one of the biggest things that I try to push in my characters, and these two characters specifically, especially considering that they're twins. And honestly, I just feel like it's something that really needs to be pushed, because whenever usually people hear about aromanticism and aromantic um, people, like they just think that, oh, you're a prude, you're this, you're that, whatever. Just similar things that might be said to ace people, because a lot of allos can't really wrap their heads around it. But being aro is so much more diverse than that, and that's one of the things that I really wanted to push on my characters, and especially in Jason and Connor, my other aro ace characters. Another theme that I wanted to talk about was intersectionality, which includes race and religion. And I just wanted to preface this, that the reason why I also include religion in my talk about race is because a lot of my background is rooted in religion, and which I imagine is due to colonialism. So I'm going to be talking a bit about that as well, and how I've written that in my characters. So as I said before, Jason and Connor share similar background to me, and they share similar experiences to me in some way or form. And their family, they're also Black and South Asian as well as I am, and their family also comes from Trinidad on their mother's side, which is where my family is also from, or at least on my mother's side anyway. So it's important to note that predominantly a lot of non-white countries kind of like struggle with queerphobia because of colonialism, and a lot of Eris's themes, Eris being their mother, is deals with colonialism and this sort of self-hatred as well. So a lot of people think that, because you're ace, because you're aro, oh, you might be accepted by these institutions. Like, oh, just because you don't want to do anything, or you might not experience any sort of attraction, that, you're probably going to be worshipped in these communities. Well, that's not the case at all. Christianity is very rigid, and, a lot of these cultures that are affected by Western colonialism is very rigid. And even though you don't experience any attraction or might not want to be in any sort of relationship, you still have to do it in the manner that they want you to. So that's one thing that I really try to show in Eris, because she is basically the personification of religion and its iron grip on society. She still hold on to a lot of colonialized views in terms of monogamy, and just being in a relationship for procreating in general, which is shown in her goals and her family goals as well. Um, so yeah, I can't really speak for everyone, but like just a lot of the spaces that I've been in, as a Black and South Asian uh, Aero ace, a lot of them are still very exclusionist and are still kind of like breaking away from like anti-LGBT kind of like rhetoric. And it's just especially when it comes to being inclusive of arrows and aces, I feel like it's something that needs to be talked a lot about more, because a lot of it really deals with just white supremacy and colonialism in general. But yeah, for the most part, I just wanted to really drive home the fact that, the aromantic community is so much more diverse than a lot of people give it credit for. Um, I really also just try to drive home this fact with my characters. I really just gave like a really quick rundown, because I would be rambling for hours upon hours if I didn't condense it. So yeah, if anybody has any questions or anything of the sort, I'd also be willing to answer that. And yeah,
That was great, Jason. Thank you.
yeah.
For a moment there, I didn't think you needed me at all. You did so well.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything. Also, hello everybody in the chat. Hello, that's one of my friends, Emily. It's nice to see you. But yeah, I'll just continue drawing, and if anybody wants me to elaborate on anything about my characters, I would really appreciate any questions at all.
All right, we'll give them a moment. I think there's some lag on the stream. Oh, we've got Tessa here.
Tessa, hello. It's good to see you again. I really enjoyed your piece earlier today. You're such a great writer and such a great storyteller. I'm sorry, there's background noise going on. But yeah, thank you all so much for coming out as well. I'll just be doodling a little fairy. This is going to be like super rough.
That's all right. All right, well, I have some questions. I will go.
Sure.
So they are twins. I
Yes,
would
they
like
are,
to
yeah.
hear about like the significance of their, them being twins to their aromantic identities.
Yeah, well, Jason and Connor, well, mostly Jason. Jason is one of my current personas, and Connor is actually a remaster of one of my older personas that I no longer use. Um, I Both characters kind of like represent how I felt about romance, or how I feel about romance now. Jason being more like how I feel about it now, and Connor being like more how I felt about it when I was younger. And I just feel like, you know, just making them twins and kind of like showing that contrast, that, it the it's just the stark contrast between them, really. Like, even though
Mhm.
they're both the same, they both look the same, they're both, Aero, they both have extremely different experiences with being Aero, and that's really one of the driving points that I wanted to bring with making them twins, as well as making them have a similar orientation. So
Yeah, that's really cool. What are you planning on? What do you plan on doing with these characters? Just drawing? You have comic in mind?
I do definitely have a comic in mind. While diversity in aromanticism, asexuality is going to be pushed in the story, there's also going to be other themes in it. I do also have themes of white supremacy, colonialism, capitalism, anti-capitalism, like all that sort of stuff in the story as well. It's definitely something that I've been working on for a very, very long time. So I don't know when I'm going to be able to get it off the ground, especially considering that, I'm so busy with work and everything else. But it is something that I definitely do want to work on and make as a comic in the future.
That would be really great. I think a lot of people would be very interested in that. I'm very excited. I like to hear about it a lot.
Thank you, thank you. I really appreciate the interest.
Tessa's got a question for you.
Let's see. Let me see. Thank you for loving my fairy. Thank you, Hollow, for the shout out. I really appreciate that. Let me see, Tesse. Let's see. Ooh, okay. This is a really good question. So Tesse says, I'm curious about how you feel about your ideas of aromanticism and relationship to Arrow has changed the more you learn about your identity. Yeah, like, how do I word this? So my ideas of aromanticism has changed over the course of several years. Mostly, a lot of it is due to that religious trauma. When I was at Connor stage, where Connor is just romance repulsed, he doesn't want to be in a relationship at all. A lot of the ideas of romance that I had came from just basically like Christianity and believe in Amaton normativity. And the fact that I had to be in a relationship, that I had to do this and that in a relationship. And uh Hollow can attest to this. Oh, hello, Skylar. Thank you for coming. Um, I really appreciate you coming out for this. But Hollow can attest to one of the biggest things that really changed how I view romance was actually a video game. So anybody who's familiar with Dragon Age Inquisition, there's a character, Dorian Pavos, who you can have a romance option is. Hello, Madame Dracona. Nice to have you here as well. Thank you both for showing up so much. Um, but yeah, Dorian Pavos was really one of the biggest things that kind of like changed my outlook on romance completely, because his romance route was just like, it didn't feel forced at all, and like, it was one of the first times that I actually got to see like a chemistry and a build up in a relationship, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, it doesn't have to be something that's forced. It could be something that's actually genuinely really great and really beautiful, and that's kind of what really like changed the game for me, and but yeah, so just breaking away from all those harmful constructs like Amaton normativity, and just forcing people to do things that they don't want in general was really what kind of like helped me change my outlook on romance and my orientation as a whole. So thank you for that, Tesse. I really appreciate that question. It's a really good question.
Yeah, it was. It is interesting how just one thing can change your whole perspective. Um,
Yeah,
it's a
absolutely.
I've heard lots of good things about that game. Another great recommendation.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, I have another question for you. So you talked a bit about what Jason and Connor want in terms of relationships, but what kind of communities do you envision them having for themselves as individuals?
Connor and Jason both have very similar end goals and very similar desires for community. Jason, for example, he is a vigilante in his world. he just wants to continue to do good and to help others um, in his world, and Connor kind of just really wants to do the same. But the only difference between the two is that Jason, does not mind having like a romantic subplot basically. Like marriage is not the end goal. Marriage is not, or being in a relationship is not like one of the things that he prioritizes, but if it happens down the line, he's totally fine with engaging with that, and he's totally fine with you know just having someone in that manner. Whereas Connor, on the other hand, Connor really just wants to like stay with his family, just as Jason does. Jason also wants to stay with his family, with his brothers, and just build robots. I mean, he's really big on just building robots and weaponry, so he just does that to kind of like help his brother with his vigilante work. So um they both just try to do good in their community by saving the city, typical Spider-Man, Batman kind of stuff. So but yeah.
That sounds really cool. I like how you phrased doesn't mind having a romantic subplot. That's so chill and not romance is usually considered like it's so important. It's the be all and end all, and you're like, yeah, it could happen.
Oh yeah, pretty much. That's pretty much how Jason deals with it. It's like, yeah, it could happen. I'm totally cool with it. And if it doesn't happen, that's okay too.
That's great.
Yeah.
Um, anyone have any questions? We've got Tesse again says I really relate to feelings changing due to positive, less traditional representation.
Oh yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
I bet that's what you two are going to be doing for people with Tesse's poetry and your comic. I can see that happening.
Oh yeah, that would be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just, breaking away from all those harmful stereotypes and harmful
Yeah.
ideologies.
Yeah, you're doing
But
some great work.
yeah,
I
thank
have
you.
another question for you. Let's see. So you talked a bit about Connor staying with his family. So how does Connor's aplatonic identity impact his role in the family, and how does it affect his connection to his family members?
His aplatonic orientation doesn't really affect his relationship with his family members much, aside from the wording. Like, for example, Jason is a very affectionate person. He's always reminding people that he loves them, whether it's romantic or platonic or familial. Connor, on the other hand, Connor is really adverse to using the word love. So instead of using that, he would say, "Oh, I care for you." That doesn't mitigate the fact that he does genuinely care for his family members. Um just really aside from that, like, his aplatonic identity doesn't really affect their relationships much, because he still cares about his family members just as much as Jason does. He just words it differently, and he just manifests it differently, because Connor also is just a very chaotic lad. So, he loves building explosives and flamethrowers and just sparklers and all those kinds of stuff. So, but yeah, that's really it for Connor.
That's great. I do really like the contrast of what you're doing, the whole premise. It's going to be
Thank
very
you.
good.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Um, Tessie says Connor is so chaotic, and she seems to like that a lot.
Yeah, thank you. He's a very chaotic lad. Jason can be chaotic sometimes too, but sometimes he has his more chill moments. It's just the moment Connor wakes up, he's just like, all right, let's blow something up,
Where are they in their lives? How old are they? What are they doing?
Um, my characters really kind of like grow with me as I get older. I've been working on their story since I was in middle school, so I want to say like maybe 12 years old. Right now though, they are same age as me, 23 years old. They
Mhm.
are also, my story takes place in a not a post-apocalyptic, but kind of a cyberpunk futuristic world of Earth. So it's basically Earth, but like way, way, way into future, like at least 100 years into the future. And they're based in New York. The characters are based in New York. I also live within the New York metropolitan area, so gotta write about my home. Um, And a lot of the things that they do is based in vigilantism, just taking down politicians and things like that. Kind of like fighting for the little guys. They're very much the story is very much built upon anti-capitalist ideals as well as anti-white supremacy ideals, among other things. So a lot of their work and a lot of the things that they do are based around that. Um, but yeah, um, they're both really like Jason. There's a lot to Jason's backstory because even though it's built on a cyberpunk world, there's still a lot of magic into it. And Jason's family comes from magic on his mother's side. So he uses his resources and the wealth that his family has amassed to help people in specifically the United States, to help them get jobs, to help them just live comfortably. And Connor does the same thing as well, but only with his machinery. But yeah, that's pretty much like the basis of everything. So
Cool. I'm seeing a lot of people liking your chaotic aromantic representation. They like that a lot.
yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, so much chaotic arrow rep.
Tessa asked, do you have other characters that you created or experimented with in the past?
Yes, I have a lot of characters actually. I have a whole toy house that doesn't show all of my characters, but it shows all the characters that I've developed enough to make a toy house for them. A lot of them are Aero Ace. I actually have a couple of art that I could show here. Let me see. So one of
Yeah,
the other
go for
characters
it.
that I can show, I have my character Raziel, who I believe is an aromantic homosexual. His stories and his ideals kind of like revolve around finding value in life, and especially as a trigger warning for unaliving. His story kind of like deals with suicide and valuing life, and it's a little bit less based in aromanticism, but as somebody who used to struggle with these thoughts and kind of like still does to this day, um, uh, kind of like focuses on finding value in life and pushing through, really. And then I have a couple of other characters who are a little bit more just self-indulgent and just for fun in general. You have my character Roman. I would have to actually look into my notes for this because I completely forget. Sometimes I forget my own character's orientations, and I'm so sorry. But yes, Roman is also an oriented arrow ace. He's kind of just like another fun character that I created who's also a vigilante and works with Jason. I He's a really, really new character. I haven't really figured out what I want to put for him in the story yet, if he does actually have any significance like Raziel or Jason. Um, yeah, that's Roman. I also have a couple of other characters, some who are not Arrow or not Ace. Most of them are Arrow Ace though. Let me see. Oh, it looks like I don't have any of that up. I'll just see if I could open up a picture of one of my other characters, Derek, who is very significant, but also not Arrow. He's actually Ace Biromantic. He is the adopted brother of uh, Jason and Connor. He is very important because he's actually Jason's quote unquote um I guess soulmate, if you want to say, mostly in terms of just plate in a platonic sense, because Jason and Derek have the longest history with one another, and they are the most committed to one another, and they do pretty much everything together. So yeah, I'm kind of rambling here, but a lot of my characters kind of like have certain themes with them, whether it's about relationships or it's about going through life and things like that. And a lot of it is very personal to me because I kind of used it to kind of like help me ground myself, especially when I'm dealing with such like terrible things um like suicide ideation and things like that. So
I love how much of yourself you're putting into this. It's so sincere and like bold. I love that. It's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Let me
Um,
see.
do we have any other questions? Anyone interested to hear any more? I quite liked in your art, you seem to pick like one color and then you work with that different shades of that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, a lot of my characters have actually different like colors that kind of like are supposed to represent themselves.
Mhm.
So Jason is blue, Connor's green, Derek is red, and like just all the other characters have like one set color to themselves mostly. So
That's gonna be so much fun to see how you use that in the comic.
yeah, thank you. It deals a lot with especially because Jason's abilities, his magical abilities are based in spirit, so they're kind of like spirit colors in a sense that show like the spirit and the personality of the character.
Well, what color are you gonna go with the Arrows flag colors for this sketch you're doing right now?
I think I was doing ace. I was gonna do ace and arrow. I think somebody said ace. I can't remember who
I can do
asked
it.
for the fairy. Yeah, I have to kind of like scroll up. Yeah, an arrow ace fairy. Yeah, so I'm gonna use the arrow and ace colors for that.
Very nice.
Yeah, but also thank you to everybody in the comments. Thank you so much. I'm just reading through them. It's a little bit overwhelming, so I can't read. So I can't like talk through them all. But I really appreciate all of your comments. It's really nice to see. I'm just floored. Thank you so much for all of your support. I really appreciate it. But yeah, is there any other questions that you might have for me or anybody in the chat might have for me?
I can go.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so what role does race or ethnicity play in Jason and Connor's understanding of their aromanticism?
Good question. So a lot of it really, as I said before, a lot of the role that race plays is really mostly just in like colonialism and the effects of how aromanticism is treated in these communities. So, for example, I can't really remember. I have to look at the ace flag. Okay, no, sorry. I got a little distracted there. I had to remember which colors go where. But yeah, a lot of the role that race plays into it with their orientation is mostly in terms of white supremacy and colonialism and kind of like breaking away with that from that, as I said before. Just looking at the histories of all these other countries, especially with them being South Asian, specifically Indian, while also hailing from Trinidad. A lot of these countries have rich histories in just LGBT support. Like, um, a lot of these countries originally did have LGBT figures and even worshipped LGBT people at one point, or well, not worship, but rather they were held in high regard. And due to colonialism and Christianity, that was kind of like destroyed over time. And these countries are still kind of like struggling to recover from that. So, a lot of the themes, especially in regards to Eris, who is like the personification, the metaphor to all of that, is to kind of like show that they're breaking away from these from this harmful rhetoric and kind of like reclaiming their autonomy over their romantic and sexual orientation in that sense.
Okay, I'm sorry. Someone's just started mowing their lawn. It's a Sunday morning here. I hope you can't hear it.
Oh, I feel it.
Yeah. Um, sorry. I had a half-formed thought, and then that lawnmower started. Oh, yeah. So they are vigilantes. They're trying to make a change. I'm curious if their aromanticism will also have a like an outward effect on the people they're helping.
Yeah, especially from Jason's end, yeah, it kind of does because Jason, as I said, is the opposite of Connor. Jason is very passionate. Jason um very much cares a lot for the people around him. And his aromanticism, I feel like it's not really explicitly said, but it does kind of like affect like his outreach and affect the what's the word, the impact that he has on other people. um because as I said before, Jason is a very caring character, and he's a very, not to that Connor isn't caring, but Jason is just extremely passionate and really values like seeking out other people and forming these relationships and things of that nature. And a lot of that really manifests in Jason and like how he goes out and like helps people for this reason, really. And even outside of that, like, he just has, especially as somebody who is directly affected by all of the injustice that's in their world, which is very similar to ours with racism, just corrupt politicians, all that stuff. Um, he just has a strong desire, even outside of his aromanticism, to kind of like protect people from that and to um, have people not endure that pain that he endured while he was living in these areas. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, no,
It's
that
a very good
absolutely
question.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice how heartfelt their story is going to be.
Thank you.
Mhm. Oh, look at those wings. Those are fantastic.
Thank you. I kind of had to eyeball the ace one. I have an ace cup kind of like sitting across from me on my dresser, and I kind of had to look back at that like, wait, which colors go where?
Yeah. Yeah, I've been there before as well.
Yeah. Is there any other questions that you might have or that anybody else might have in the audience?
Yeah, I've got more, I've got plenty. What should we go with next? What is something that the twins uniquely understand about each other due to sharing their aromantic identity?
That is a very good question. I think the one thing that they both really understand about one another is just the fact that they are both arrow despite having such stark differences. Um, really kind of just like helps them to like empathize with one another and understand like, hey, this is like, for example, Jason 100% understands why Connor is adverse to romance and doesn't wish to engage in romance and stuff like that because it's actively harmed him, and it's even harmed Jason despite him actually liking it. And for specifically Amaton normativity, like they both live in an Amaton normative world. So given that they are both arrow and they both have very unconventional views of romance, they can empathize with one another and kind of just like go to show that like there's that like solidarity where they're both kind of like outcasts at the end of the day, despite you know Jason, for example, he might be more palatable to allos, to exclusionary allos, because he's still willing to engage in a romantic relationship, and Connor might not. But at the end of the day, they're both still arrow and they're both still considered anomalies to society, despite the fact that they're both perfect the way they are.
That's nice. It sounds like they have a really great relationship. Do you see them having a solid relationship throughout the comic? I don't know how much of it you have plotted.
Oh
Or
yeah,
did,
I have a lot of sorry, go ahead.
no, you talk. I want your answers.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like different bits and pieces of stories that happen throughout their lives at each age. Um, they are definitely going to stay together, just as one thing that I definitely want to drive home with the characters is that there's four brothers. There's Jason, Derek, Connor, and Troy. Derek and Troy are not blood related to any of them. Jason and Connor are the only two that are blood related to one another. But they have such a very like strong kinship in their brotherhood, and one thing that I really want to drive home with them is that they stay together no matter what, because a lot of like Jason, even though he has a mother, his mother was absent for majority of his life, due to the just the goals of the family and the goals of the history of the family, and a lot of things that happened in between there. And one thing that I really wanted to drive home was, how they stick together no matter what, and how, because they are the people who have the most consistencies with one another. Like, they've lived with each other for so long, and they've known each other for so long that they're going to stick together, because at the end of the day, like, I feel like not even like anything romantic can kind of like transcend the relationship that they each have with one another, because they've all been together and they've all like worked together and lived with one another for so long. So yeah, Jason and Connor are definitely going to stay living with one another, stay working with one another. It's definitely not something that I am going to write out of the story or write them to be apart. That's one of the things that I really want to drive home with both of them.
That is so refreshing to hear.
Yeah, thank you.
We have a question from Nair, the previous host. Or before that, A said, having previously positive LGBTQA plus representation affected or nearly erased by colonialism is heartbreaking and unfortunately a common story I hear, which is, yeah, I've heard that often too.
Yeah.
And the question, it says, for your characters, is this something they knew all along and were planning to combat? Was this something even more inspired when coming into their own identities? Now, what
That
this?
That is a really great question. This is kind of something that they've kind of like, it's not something that they knew all along, but it's just a matter of something that they had to learn. It's like, for example, when you're growing up Black in America, you have to grow up with having that talk with your parents, for example, that talk about what you're supposed to say when you get pulled over, or like, how you're supposed to interact with other people, like generally, usually like cops and stuff like that, or generally anybody that might have an advantage over you and might want to hurt you, because at the end of the day, the world is really going to be working against you. And you have this chat at a very, very young age. I had mine, I have to say, probably like way before even middle school. Um, in regards to combating it, it's just kind of something that they've had a passion for as they've learned more about the realities of their world. Um, and yeah, and it's definitely something that they were more inspired by as they started coming into their identities, as they started realizing who they were and what role that they were going to play in society, and how society was going to treat them based on their orientations and their identities. So a lot of it is really just like, it's also kind of like sort of an outrage where, why should people be treated this way, just because of something that they can't control, so they continue to fight because they just want people, they don't want people to go through the same things that they did, and they just want to create a better future for um, younger children and children who might identify this way as well. So yeah, that was a very good question, thank you.
Yeah. I'm really curious what their vigilantism will look like if this world somewhat mirrors ours. So we have the vigilantism, or I guess activism also, that we know. But then you say it's more tech and there's more magic. How will that affect the vigilantism?
Very good question. So the vigilantism is kind of like a mix of both. Of course, there's going to be some protests and things like that, or there might be some protests and stuff like that. But given that, for example, since the story takes place in New York, a lot of like hyper rich people live in New York. I mean, they kind of already do now, but it's even more skewed. So so there will be protests. There might be protests, but it would be extremely dangerous, since I feel America in this world would be a lot more of like a fascist state. Um, so a lot of the vigilantism is actually going to manifest a lot like, say, a movie, like say John Wick or something. Like, the characters are going to be doing like these action shots, flips and tricks, and like blowing things up, as Connor would put it. So it's gonna be like very exciting, but also like the stakes are still very high. So like even though the action is going to be a little bit more on the fantastical side with fighting robots with magic and weaponry and things like that, it's still like the backstories behind why they're doing these things is still very high and something to be taken seriously. Thank you. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the hearing about all their teamwork. So, I guess in opposition to that, what is something that the twins struggle to understand about each other?
That's a very good question. The twins don't really struggle to understand anything about one another. It's just a matter of um, suppose they do something that they don't understand, they just accept that as the truth of the other twin. Um, Given that they have similar um backstories to one another, and given that they have similar experiences to one another as they were growing up, they kind of like empathize with one another, and they kind of like have that solidarity with one another. So it's really not a matter of, they don't really struggle to understand anything about one another, but it's just that, you know they can empathize with one another, and that's how they understand one another. And if they don't understand one another, they just simply accept that as the truth of the said twin. So I hope that answers your question. Sorry.
Yeah, that sounds like a perfect relationship.
Yeah,
Um,
they're
I want to know, do they have the twin telepathy? Do they know what the other one's doing? What the other one's thinking?
sometimes, yeah. Um, there might be a time where Connor is just like, I don't know, say he's probably catching something on fire. Um, he's probably catching like Derek's like couch or bed on fire or whatever, and Jason's just like, "Oh, let me help with that." Pours gasoline on it. But then they absolutely do buy Derek a new bed or whatever, for example. They do definitely have that kind of like dynamic with one another. And they both really do like to fight, so they spar a lot. Um, Connor has an exosuit that's very similar to Iron Man's Bleeding Edge suit, for anybody who's a Marvel nerd like I am. And he's also created similar suits for the brothers. Jason has his own suit as well, so they spar a lot. And yeah, but they do definitely have that kind of dynamic with one another, where especially whenever Jason's in his chaotic moods, which he's not in all the time, but he can be sometimes. Um, they're very much like that with one another.
Great. How do they get into vigilantism? Vigilantism. Where do they learn to fight? How does it begin?
That's a very good question, because that deals a lot with their father, who I have not talked about yet. So, just as a preface, their father is Damian Abrams. You have Eris, who's the mother, and then Damian, who's the father. Um, Damian is one of the hyper rich billionaires, politicians in the United States at the time. Um, he owns a weapons manufacturing company called Abrams Industries, and basically his story is that he his wife and him were looking to have an heir, and they never really had any biological kids with one another, because his wife pretty much just cheated on him, had a child who ended up being Derek, and basically eventually became no more, to kind of escape his wrath. And as a result of that, he kind of like cheated on several of his servants, and had children with them to try and find that heir. So, and Jason and Connor were both a result of that. Um, and as the children were growing up, they were actually put in a facility, which eventually became Abrams Academy, where they would not only learn about how to run a company and the history of the United States, which is very much like not the real history, but kind of like a whitewashed history, but they would also learn how to fight, and they would take up different like skill sets. And one of Jason's biggest skill sets that he took on was gymnastics, and Connor did the same thing. Um, Jason and Connor, given how their mother was, because their mother eventually kind of just like left Abrams Industries, and kind of like abandoned Jason, and not only that, but didn't tell Jason that Connor actually existed. Jason ended up leaving Abrams Industries at a much younger age than Connor did. Connor kind of had to fight his way out. So Jason like learned him like gymnastics and kind of like how to fight and things like that through Abrams Academy, while also kind of like fending for himself on the streets after he was kicked out. And Connor was kind of the same thing. He learned about machinery. He learned about like fighting and defending himself while at Abrams Academy, and eventually fought his way out to kind of like try and find Jason after he found out that, Jason also existed, because the mother really never told each other about one another. So it's a really long story, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I like
Yeah.
hearing that. Well, I like hearing how you're going to work into the story, them rejecting their I guess the capitalism their father represents.
Yeah, their father really represents capitalism and white supremacy, for the most part.
Oh.
Yeah.
What's another good question? Oh, while we're on the topic of family, how does Aromanticism relate to their family's culture or community? And how does their first generation background influence how they think about kinship and relationships and intimacy?
That is a very good question. Their aromanticism in regards to their biological family, which is mostly in regards to Eris, since their biological family on their father's side is not really considered family. But in regards to Eris in that side of the family, it's kind of seen more as like defiance in a way. So their aromanticism and the fact that they neither of them have any desire to have children. Excuse me. Neither of them have any, or at least Connor doesn't have any desire to be in a relationship, and Jason doesn't have any desire to be in a um conventional or relationship. That's really what constitutes like them being kind of like deviants in the family. But in regards to their found family, the four brothers, aromanticism I feel like does play a big part in it, because they both have such unique aspects and a unique perspectives on romance and on kinship and relationships. So, whereas in a traditional family, like somebody might get into a relationship and then eventually leave the family and kind of like isolate themselves from that family, Jason and Connor do not share those beliefs at all. And that kind of like also manifests in Troy and Derek, despite them not being Arrow as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the most part. They just value like friendship, and they value like their more platonic relationships, and they're a lot less likely to abandon their family in that sense.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Your fairy's looking fantastic.
Thank you. I just literally just made Jason a fairy.
Yeah, that's great. I wonder what kind of powers this fairy would have.
Probably the powers to yeet normative thinking out of people.
Oh, fantastic.
And maybe Connor might throw in something extra, like being able to blow somebody up with eyesight or something.
Something chaotic.
Yeah, it's definitely something very chaotic.
What's this you're doing? Are they tattoos?
This here, these are actually his piercings. He
Oh,
has,
fancy.
yeah. Jason actually has a couple of piercings. He has a set of clavicle piercings on each side, and then he also has belly button piercings, which you're not seeing here.
Hmm.
But because a lot of his abilities deal with like the undead and deal with spirits and things like that, his piercings actually are supposed to resemble an autopsy scar.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
graphic.
Yeah, Jason's story is very dark, but yeah. Yeah.
Nice. I was thinking about how you said their identity or like their behavior, I guess, is seen as defiant, and I quite like that idea that aromanticism is defiant of so much, and the whole story will be very defiant for them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. But yeah, they're both just very defiant in, what is expected of them.
Yeah.
Both on their mother's side and their father's side, but I feel like it's more potent on their mother's side because they have stronger ties with their mother. So,
What are you doing with the art now?
right now I'm just doing this little thing where I kind of like color in the line art. This is a really, really rough line art, really, really rough sketch. But right now what I'm doing is I copy the base layer with all the colors, I duplicate it, and then I put it on top and use a layer mask. And then that's gonna color in like all the lines and stuff as you can see here. And then I usually just brighten I make it more saturated while lowering the brightness. So that's kind of what gives it this look.
Okay.
It's looking very rough. This is very rough. Definitely not like one of my finished pieces, which I could actually probably go on and show. I have a couple of more finished pieces that I've opened up here if anyone's interested in seeing that. But yeah, it's kind of something that I usually do with my line art for the most part. I think I'll leave it like this though, since I
Yes.
want to get to anybody else's requests, if anybody else has any other requests.
We're coming up on to the end of our time, I think. Although we have got interest.
Yeah. But yeah, does anybody
ask
else have
you,
any other? Oh,
if
sorry, go ahead.
not, you one final question. Oh, here we go. We have a question for you. It's a
Sure.
great one. This is from Hollow. It's what's your favorite part about being Arrow?
Thank you, Hollow. That is a very great question. I guess my favorite part about being Arrow is that, we I just feel like we as a community as a whole are extremely powerful and just extremely, just we hold a certain power over, especially Allos. Not to say that we're better than them, but just a matter of that, like we really challenge things that are so ingrained in society that, they don't even realize it themselves. I can't tell how many times I've gone on Twitter or TikTok or in any kind of social media really, and I have seen people just talk about like normalizing certain things, like for example normalizing co-parenting without being in a romantic relationship, or marrying a best friend or something like that. And I'm just like thinking to myself internally, like, we've already talked about this, we've already normalized this in our community. So just like, yeah, like just it's just one of the biggest things that I really love about being Arrow, is how we kind of like defy all of these like Amaton normativity, despite aside from being such a horrible word to pronounce, um is
It is.
yeah, it has such a grip on our society. And a lot of people don't even realize it, like a lot of people don't even realize a lot of the things that they internalized um about like romance and about like being in a relationship and stuff like that is rooted in Amateur normativity. And I feel like as Arrows, because we're a little bit more sensitive to that, we kind of like break that down, and we're like, all right, how about, here are a couple of alternatives, how about we do this instead? So one thing that I could say that I just really really love about being Arrow is the diversity in the community, as well as being able to subvert these expectations and kind of like break them down. And just kind of uh you know just live life authentically and give people, not only ourselves, but to give other people other options. I mean, there's nothing stopping an Alo from being in a quasi-platonic relationship. There's nothing stopping an Alo from co-parenting with their friends, you know? Like, it's definitely like arrows really bring a lot to the table when discussing romance. And um I just feel like that's one thing that I really love about us and love about being aromantic. And you know just we have a lot to contribute to society, and I feel like a lot of people really need to listen to arrows more.
I couldn't agree more. I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have seen also the have you considered this one thing? And it's always like you're just the tip of the iceberg right there.
Right,
There's
right.
so much more attached to it, so much more influencing it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oops, I keep switching between drawing Connor and drawing Jason. So I'll just draw Connor. I usually draw Jason a lot. But yeah, is there any other questions? Ooh, thank you for that. Thank you for all your comments. Thank you. I'll kind of go back to the fairy.
Yes. We have a
Little
final
Jason.
comment from Tesse, which is, I love the willingness to question traditional relationship structures and traditional ideas of relationship hierarchies. I also love that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's one of the greatest things. It's one of the things that I really love about the Aero community, honestly. It's just really great. And like I
Mhm.
said before, I feel like the Aero community can really has a lot that they can contribute to society. And like Amaton normativity, especially, people talk about toxic masculinity and people talk about, all this type of stuff. And, I think that's great, but like Amaton normativity is definitely something that's extremely dangerous and extremely harmful to Allos and Aros alike. So I feel like it's
Oh, yeah.
definitely something that needs to be talked about more.
Yes. It has a
Yeah.
huge grip on everyone, doesn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. It had a
I was
huge grip
having,
on me.
yeah, it sounds
Yeah.
like it. Well, I'm glad
Yeah.
you uh have freed yourself from it or moving away from doing that.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I don't know what else to draw, so I'll kind of just show. Please ignore the titles. I kind of just like write whatever is on my mind whenever I'm making these titles. They're not actually real titles, but so I'll just show some of the other art that I have here. Um, but if is there any other final thoughts? Also,
Um,
stars forever. What's atomic? I love that.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
pretty close to the spelling, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, very, very close. It's incredible. Yeah, as I said before, Amaton normativity is not only a menace to relationships and how we perceive relationships, but also in writing. Like, come on.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Yeah. But yeah.
But your art is all very cool.
Thank you. Thank
We're all
you.
very excited for this comic. We've got lots of fans now waiting for it. So you take your time. We'll be here.
Thank you. I've been working on it for such a long time. I don't even know. It's just a matter of like don't be hyper aware of the titles, please. Hello. Don't bring it to awareness. But yeah, it is certainly something. I have a lot of stories for it. It's just a matter of actually drawing the comics. I have a hard time with that, but I'm getting there. The stories are definitely still there, and I do definitely want to turn this into a comic. But you know, for the meantime, we have a lot of art and a lot of stuff like that. So
Great. Well, thank you, Jason. Thank you for joining us.
yeah, thank you for having me.
I'm very pleased by how this is going. You're a fantastic artist. You've got lots of great ideas.
Thank you, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you again for having me, and thank you for everybody in the comments for your support and your comments. This was really entertaining and a lot of fun.
Okay, then. You have a nice day.
Thank you. Same for you as well.
Mhm. Okay, there I am. All right, that was fantastic, wasn't it, everyone? Jason's been brilliant. And that brings us to the end of this fundraiser. That is the last of the guests. I hope you all enjoyed hearing about Tessé and Tessé's work and Jason's work. I'll just close this off then. Thank you for joining us. Thank you everyone who participated, the viewers and the guests. We will be announcing the final tally of the fundraiser in the next day or so, which will be very exciting to see how much we've raised. All the money is does fantastic things for us. You know, we couldn't do this without you, and because of you, we can do amazing things. We're really looking forward to all the new things we can do this year. So thank you for joining us. And I would like to thank the Aurea team also, as always, for everything I've done. We had Loki in the background, helping out with all the tech. I couldn't do it. And thank you, Nair, for hosting once again. I believe that's everything. If you have any feedback for us, you can do it via the feedback form or email at contact@aromanticism.org. Finally, yes, the donation link is in the description. Thank you everyone who has donated. And that is all, I believe. You'll have a nice day. I hope you enjoyed ASAW and have a good one.